A grocery store peach costs you $1 right now, and inside every one of them is a free tree, if you know what to do with the pit. You buy the peach, you eat the peach, you throw the pit in the trash. And then come spring, you drive to a garden center and pay $30, $40, $60 for the same tree your grandfather grew out of the dirt for nothing. The reason his pit grew and yours won't isn't magic. It's 3 small steps somebody had a real good reason to make you forget. The old record says your grandfather's pit-grown orchard fed more mouths longer than the store-bought one down the road ever did. In the summer of 1936, in a red dirt corner of Bartow County, Georgia, a man named Elias Warren fed 6 children off a scatter of fruit trees his own father had grown from spit-out pits. Peach, plum, cherry, one lonesome apricot in the corner. Not one of those trees came from a nursery. Not one of them cost him $1. The oldest peach in the row was 31 years old that summer, and it had started life as a pit somebody's little girl dropped in the yard in 1905 after Sunday supper. That whole orchard, 6 trees deep, was built out of what a modern grocery shopper throws in the trash without looking. Today, most of us couldn't grow a fruit tree if the power stayed on for 100 years. You buy the peach, you eat the peach, you throw the pit away, and then come spring, you drive to a garden center and pay $30, $40, $60 for a sapling in a plastic pot. The same kind of tree Elias Warren's daddy grew out of the dirt for free. But here's the twist, friend. The reason his daddy's pits grew and yours won't isn't magic. It's 3 small steps that somebody had a real good reason to make you forget. Before we start counting down, hear this. Number 8 is the one the climate map decides for you. Grow it in the wrong county and it dies on you. Grow it in the right one and it hands you fruit for 40 years. Number 5. The nursery trade would rather you never learned because it's the trick that lets one seedling become any variety of fruit you want. And number 2 is the pit every farm kid in this country used to plant in the yard on a dare, and now grown men pay $40 for it in a pot. None of this faded because it quit working. It faded because somebody sells you what your grandfather grew out of his own supper plate. That's not on you. They're just good at making you need them. I'm Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge. Before my grandfather Eli died, he made me swear that knowing wouldn't die with him. So I set it down, 94 pages of it, in one book, at Silas Mercer. Shop, links are below. I'll not bring it up again. And I'll tell you plain what the old ways still do and where they stop, the way Eli never lied about the ground either. All right, back to it. Number 20. The peach pit itself saved off the kitchen table. Half a peach on the board, the pit sitting there wet and orange-fleshed, ready to go in the bucket like every peach pit in this country goes in the bucket. Your great-grandmother didn't. She wiped it off with her apron, walked it out to the sill, and set it on a saucer to dry. That single motion, the not throwing away, is the whole beginning. The university extension folks will tell you seedling peaches don't come true to the parent, and that's honest. We'll get to it. But a peach seedling started from a pit still becomes a real peach tree, and a real peach tree still puts real peaches on your table. The nursery trade quit selling you that idea a long time ago, because a seedling cost them nothing and cost you nothing, and there's no margin in nothing. Save the pit. Clean it. That's step 1. That one motion, friend, and you're already ahead of the man who's paying $40 for what he threw in the trash last Tuesday. Number 19, the honest note. Seedlings don't come true. I'll be straight with you before we go one more number down this list. A pit from a peach you loved is not going to grow you the exact same peach. That's a horticultural fact, and I'm not going to lie to you about it, because a 7th generation mountain man's grandfather never lied about the ground either. What the seedling will give you is a real peach tree. Maybe better than the parent. Maybe worse. Sometimes surprisingly close. Always its own tree. Old orchardists knew this. They planted 10 pits, culled the weakest, kept the ones that made good fruit, and grafted the rest. That's why every old farm had a fence line thick with seedling fruit trees, and nobody paid a dime for the nursery version. Buy the guaranteed name variety, pay $30, plant it once, replace 10 free trees with one expensive one. That was a good deal for the man selling saplings, not for the man who wanted 6 trees in his yard. That one they didn't ban. They just made sure you'd forget it was ever an option. Number 18. Cleaning and drying the pit, the small skill nobody teaches. The old man on the porch would take that pit, rub it under running water till every scrap of fruit was off, then set it out to air dry a day or two on a wooden shelf. Not in the sun. Not a big skill, a 5-minute one. But if you leave fruit flesh on the pit and drop it straight in a jar of damp sand, you grow mold, not a tree. That's the whole failure most folks hit their first try. Every seedling that dies from mold is another sapling you have to buy from the garden center. Clean pit, dry pit, then storage. Extension bulletins on stone fruit propagation still teach this exact step because it still works. Eli did it with a paring knife on the porch rail. You can do it standing at the kitchen sink tonight. That one they only quit teaching. The next one they replaced with a plastic pot on a shelf. Number 17. The grafted cultivar shelf. While your grandfather's pit habit vanished, somewhere between the late 1800s and the middle of the 1900s, the American home orchard got quietly replaced. Not by law, by the nursery catalog. Grafted, named cultivars, the exact same fruit every time, apple, peach, plum, got mass-marketed to home growers as the modern way, and the old habit of saving pits and starting your own seedlings got labeled backward, unreliable, hillbilly. The stated reason was quality. The actual driver was that a grafted name tree is a product you buy from somebody, and a pit is a product you throw away. One of those two makes a man money. The other makes you a peach tree for free. That's not a conspiracy, friend. That's just how markets work when you let them tell you what's normal. The nursery folks aren't villains in a courthouse. They're just very good at making the free version look like the poor version. Number 16. The plum pit, purple and red. 2 halves of a purple plum on the board, a red plum split open, 3 pits saved. That's the middle of the picture, and it's the middle of this list because plums are honestly the easiest of the 5 to start from seed. Old European and Appalachian smallholders planted plum pits by the dozen because plums took to seedling propagation better than most stone fruit. And the seedlings, even when they didn't come true, still made usable fruit for jam, sauce, drying, and stock feed. A plum in the yard right now, mature, costs you $25 minimum at any garden center. A plum pit costs you the 2 seconds not to throw it away. Cold stratify it, we'll get to that in a minute, and you've got a seedling by spring. 2 or 3 seedlings, keep the best. That's the way it was done for centuries before somebody sold your grandfather a catalog. First pattern break. Here's where it stops being quaint and starts being the reason the garden center has a parking lot. Every one of the next 4 items is a step or a species the nursery counter would rather you never work out for yourself. Because the minute you can grow a fruit tree out of what's in your kitchen trash tonight, they lose a customer for the next 50 years. Keep going. Number 8 is the one the climate map picks for you. And number 5 is the trick that turns any seedling into any variety you want. Number 15. Mason jar stratification. The winter in the fridge step. Eli wrote this one down in '58 and I've got it in front of me. Peach and plum pits, damp sand, mason jar, back of the icebox, 90 days. That's the whole method. Cold, moist stratification. You take your cleaned pit, wrap it in a handful of damp peat or sand or paper towel, seal it in a jar, and put it in the refrigerator for roughly 3 months. That's it. That's how you make winter in a kitchen. The tree wired into the pit by thousands of years of evolution needs a cold spell before it'll wake up. Skip the cold and the pit sits there forever like a rock. Do the cold, and by spring you've got a root pushing out. Every extension service in the country still teaches this method for stone fruit because it still works. The garden center version is a potted sapling for $35. Your version is a jar in the fridge for 90 days. Number 14. The cherry stone. There's a whole cherry sitting on that same board. Sweet cherry, tart cherry, whatever your climate takes. Cherry stones are honestly the finicky one of the five. They want a longer cold stratification, sometimes closer to 4 months, and they don't sprout as freely as plums. But the old New England farm wife had a cherry tree in the dooryard for pies and preserves, and 9 times out of 10 it started as a spit-out stone from somebody's supper. A backyard cherry tree at a nursery today runs you $40 to $60. A cherry stone runs you the discipline to save it. Now, honest note again, because we owe it to you. Seedling cherries vary. Some make good pie cherries, some make bird cherries. If you plant 3 or 4 and cull down, you get a keeper. That's the old way. Number 13. Cracking or scoring the pit. Step 2's hidden move. Some pits will sprout without help. Some won't, because that hard shell is doing its job, protecting the seed inside from a hungry world. The old orchardist trick, and Eli did this with the corner of a pair of pliers, was to gently crack the outer shell without crushing the kernel, just enough to let water in. Some folks nick it with a file. Some folks let winter do it for them outdoors. Either way, you're helping the seed do what it wants to do anyway. The nursery cultivar system replaced this 5-second skill with a shelf of shrink-wrap saplings. One motion of a hand tool, friend, is what stands between you and a free peach tree. Number 12. Fall outdoor sowing, the lazy grandfather method. Not everybody has a spare refrigerator shelf. The old subsistence method was simpler. In the fall, after you eat the last peaches of the season, you take the pits, walk out to a corner of the yard the mower doesn't hit, and push them an inch into the soil. That's it. The winter does the stratification for you. The spring rain wakes them up, and by May you've got seedlings you didn't ask for. Half of the old farm orchards in this country started exactly like that. Pits chucked in a fence row, forgotten, discovered as trees 5 years later. Your bill for the mason jar, the sand, the fridge space, $0. Your bill for the sapling at the nursery, whatever they feel like charging that season. The old method still works because the ground still works. Second pattern break. Halfway now. Take a breath. Everything we've counted so far is one of 2 things. A pit worth saving, or a step worth learning. And every one of them is free. Somebody, somewhere in the last century, decided a family growing its own fruit trees out of the supper plate was bad for business. So the pits went in the trash and the trees went on a shelf with a price tag. Number 8 is coming. The almond and the climate reality most folks get wrong. Number 5 is the one that changes everything because it's how one seedling becomes any variety you want. Keep going. Number 11. Storage moisture. The failure mode nobody warns you about. This is where most first-time pit growers lose the whole batch. Too dry, the seed dies. Too wet, it molds. The rule the old-timers used was simple. The medium should feel like a wrung-out sponge, damp to the touch but nothing dripping when you squeeze it. Check the jar every couple weeks. Toss any pit that goes soft or smelly. Extension services still teach this exact moisture standard because it's the honest one. The nursery replacement, buy a live tree, don't worry about it, costs you $30+ per tree. This costs you 5 minutes of attention a month for 90 days. Number 10. The apricot pit. Apricot's the one nobody thinks about. And I'll tell you something I don't often tell. The first apricot pit I ever tried to sprout, sometime in the mid-'80s, I was maybe 18 and thought I knew better than the old man. Didn't clean it right, left some fruit on, wrapped it wet in a rag, threw it in the pantry, and forgot about it. 2 months later, I opened it up in February, and it was a black, moldy mess. I brought it out to Eli, and he looked at it, looked at me, and said 3 words. Try again, son. That's it. Didn't lecture, didn't shame. Just handed me another apricot off the shelf and told me to clean it this time. I've grown apricots from pits ever since. So if the first one rots on you, that's not you failing. That's the price of learning something they stopped teaching. Try again. Number 9, germination and the first pair of leaves. Once your pit's had its winter, real or refrigerator, you plant it about an inch deep in a pot of decent potting soil and put it on a sunny sill. Keep it damp, not wet. In a few weeks, sometimes sooner, sometimes later, a green shoot comes up, unfolds a pair of leaves, and that, friend, is the moment a peach tree becomes yours. The sprouted root and the small leaves coming out of a brown pit. That's the moment. There's no store on earth that sells you that moment for the price of a peach you already ate. Number 8, the almond and the climate reality. Here's the one I promised. Almonds. The honest truth is this. Almonds are climate picky. If you live somewhere with mild winters and dry summers, Central California is the poster child. And a stretch of the Southwest works too. A home almond from a pit is absolutely a real thing. If you live where winter goes hard below zero, or where late frost hits blooming trees, an almond seedling will heartbreak you. The nursery folks won't tell you that plain. They'll sell you the tree in either climate and shrug when it dies. The old orchardist wisdom was simpler. Grow what your ground already grows. Wild cousins of. Where almonds want to be, they'll take a pit and run with it. Where they don't, plant a plum instead. That's not the almond's fault, friend. That's the map. Third pattern break, down to 7. Now, everything above this line is a skill or a species. Everything below this line is where seedlings start turning into an actual orchard. The trick that lets one free pit-grown tree become any variety of fruit you want. The way the old wild orchard actually worked. And the one pit every farm kid in this country used to plant on a dare. Stay with me. Number 7, transplanting the seedling outdoors. Step 3, the anchor. Your seedling's a foot tall in the pot. Now it goes in the ground. The old method. Dig a hole twice the width of the root ball. Set the seedling at the same depth it was in the pot. Backfill with the same soil you took out. Not fancy amendments. Water it in. Mulch a ring around the base to hold moisture and keep the mower off. That's the whole transplant. Do it in early spring or late fall, when the tree is dormant. Honest note carried forward. Your seedling is a peach tree, not necessarily a copy of the peach you ate. If you want the exact fruit, you'll need number 5. But even a seedling that turns out different can be a beautiful, productive tree or rootstock for the trick coming up. Number 6, hedge and windbreak, the extra return. Something else the old-timers did with seedling fruit trees. They planted them as hedge. A line of plum and cherry seedlings along a pasture edge became a windbreak, a wildlife screen, a spring bloom for the pollinators, and in a good year a bushel of fruit you didn't plan for. Even the seedlings that made lousy fruit made good hedgerow. The nursery replacement, buy ornamental trees for the same job, runs you thousands per property. Eli's back fence had 8 seedling plums along it, and I never saw him buy a single one. That fence is still there, friend. That's the physical evidence of what a saved pit becomes over 40 years. Number 5, the grafting trick. Here's the one I promised. If you want exact fruit, the specific peach, the specific plum, the specific cherry, you take your seedling, once it's grown a year or two and got a good pencil-thick trunk, and you graft a small piece of a known name variety onto it. That's it. A cutting the size of a pencil from a neighbor's tree, a friend's orchard, an old homestead that's still fruiting, joined to your seedling's root and lower trunk. Your seedling becomes the rootstock. The scion becomes the fruiting top. And now you've got an exact variety fruit tree that cost you a pit and a cutting. This is exactly what the nursery does, and they charge you $35 for it. Learn one grafting cut. The whip and tongue is the classic, and any decent extension pamphlet still teaches it, and you've unlocked the whole system. And the reason it's number 5 is that this one changes everything. 4th pattern break. 4 to go. Everything above this line is how a pit becomes a tree, and how a tree becomes an orchard. Everything below is the way whole families used to keep themselves in fruit for a lifetime. And the one pit every kid used to plant on a dare. And the plain truth that ties this whole list together. Almost there. Number 4. The dooryard cherry and the pie tradition. A dooryard cherry, one tree by the porch, seedling grown, sometimes tart, sometimes sweet, always covered in blossoms in April, was standard equipment on a farmhouse from Maine to Missouri right up until the Second World War. A dozen quart jars of pie filling off one tree every summer kept a family in dessert for the year. Stratify the stone, sprout it, transplant it. That's the recipe. Grandma didn't buy pie filling. She grew it out of what she had eaten the summer before. Number 3. The wild seedling orchard, the actual old model. This is the part the nursery catalog erased. The old home orchard wasn't a neat row of tagged, purchased trees. It was a rough dozen seedlings, half of them lousy, half of them keepers. And you kept the keepers and let the lousy ones be shade, or firewood, or hedgerow. That was the actual American subsistence orchard for 200 years. Not exact fruit, not tagged varieties. Free trees, culled by taste. Modern horticulture calls that inefficient. The old farmer called it Tuesday, and a family fed off a dozen mixed seedlings ate more fruit in a year than the average grocery shopper eats in 3 today. Number 2. The plum. The dare tree every farm kid planted. Because this is the one that every farm kid in America used to plant in the yard on a dare, and half the time it grew, and half the time it fed a family for 30 years without a dollar changing hands. Purple plum, red plum, wild American plum. They take to seedling propagation better than any other stone fruit in this list. If you're going to try one pit this season, friend, make it a plum. Cold stratified in the fridge, planted in the spring, and by the time you're looking at retirement, it's dropping fruit on your grandkids. Eli had one in the back that his father planted around 1922 out of a plum somebody brought up from Virginia. That tree fed 4 generations of Mercers off one dropped pit. 1 pit, 4 generations, never a bill. Number 1. The self-fed home orchard, grown out of your own supper plate. Number 1 isn't a trick. It's the thing every pit and every step above it was pointing at. Number 1 is a home orchard built entirely out of what you are about to throw in the trash. Peach, plum, cherry, apricot, almond, where the climate takes it. 6 trees, 8 trees, a dozen, grown from pits that cost you nothing, over years that cost you patience, in a yard you already own. That's the whole promise. And it was standard equipment in this country for 200 years. Elias Warren, back in 1936 in Bartow County, Georgia, the man from the beginning. He wasn't poor, friend. He was fed. His 6 children ate peaches and plums and cherries off trees his father had grown from pits. And the record shows that orchard outlasted the man, outlasted the farm, outlasted the county fair. His son took the first place preserves ribbon home from in 1948. Some of those trees are still there. I know, because a cousin of mine walked that property in the 90s and counted them. The nursery folks aren't evil. They just sold the country on the idea that a fruit tree comes in a plastic pot with a price tag. It doesn't. It comes in your kitchen tonight, in the pit of the peach you're about to eat. That's not lost knowledge. That's just what everybody forgot. Here's the honest part before we go. I'm not selling you paranoia, friend. Nobody outlawed the pit in a courthouse. Nobody's coming to inspect your fridge for a mason jar of damp sand. This isn't prepper talk, and it isn't fear. It's a habit your family had for 2 centuries and dropped in one, and getting it back costs you nothing but attention. And a real note. Climates vary, seedlings vary, and some of what I said won't work everywhere. Ask your county extension office if you're not sure what grows on your ground. That's what they're there for. Now pick one. Just one, this week. You don't need to do all 5 species. You don't need to graft. You don't need an orchard. Save the pit from the next peach you eat. Or save a plum pit, the easy one. Or drop 3 cherry stones in a corner of the yard this fall and let winter do the work. Pick the smallest one on the list and just do that. I did the plum myself. The first year I moved back to the ridge, in my 30s. 6 pits in a jar in November. 3 sprouted, 2 made it to transplant, 1's still there and it fruits every August. That whole tree cost me not throwing something away. That's it. Tell me down below. Did your grandparents keep a pit-grown tree in the yard? What did your people grow out of the supper plate that nobody grows anymore? The one that gets the most comments is the one I build next. Your granddad grew every fruit tree on his place out of what he ate. Somebody just didn't get the chance to pass it down to you. Now it's yours again. Next time we're going deeper. Apple seeds, pear seeds, and the one wild fruit tree every old homestead had along the fence line that the modern nursery won't sell you at any price, because it doesn't grow uniform enough for a shelf. There's a reason the old orchards had it, and the new ones don't, and it's not about fruit quality. It's about a market that decided a hedgerow full of free fruit was bad for business. If you want to be here when I count that one down, stick around. This channel is one man on a ridge trying to make sure his grandfather's leather journal doesn't die in a drawer. You showing up is what keeps it going. Keep the old ways. They kept us.